I never expected a single rainy afternoon to change the way I see my entire life. It was after school in Kampala. The rain was falling hard, the kind that made the whole world slow down. Most of my friends had already run home, splashing through puddles, but I stayed behind. Not because I had work to finish, but because I just didn't feel like going. I wandered into the library to wait out the storm. It was quiet, the kind of quiet where you can hear the hum of the old ceiling fan and smell the dust on the books. I walked between the shelves, running my fingers over the spines, when I saw it. A small, faded red diary, tucked behind a stack of atlases. Its cover was worn smooth like it had been held too many times. The lock was broken. The pages inside were wrinkled, stained, like it had been caught in the rain once before. I opened it, and the very first line stopped me cold. It was my name. Michael, the boy who walks as if the wind carries him. I froze. Who would write something like that? I flipped through the pages, and every single one was filled with poems. Some described places I knew, the market near the taxi park, the mango tree by the football field. Others felt uncomfortably personal. My smile when talking to friends. The way I tap my pen when I'm thinking. This wasn't random. Whoever wrote this knew me. In the margins of one page, I noticed something strange. A faint sketch of a small music box, drawn so lightly it could almost be missed. At the very back of the diary was a small black and white photograph. A girl in a school uniform. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't even looking at the camera. She just looked quiet. And I had no idea who she was. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about her. The next day, I showed the photo around. Most people shook their heads. Until one girl, Grace, tilted her head and said, "That's Anna. She was in senior 3, last year." I felt something sink inside me. Grace told me Anna was quiet. Always by herself. Usually in the library or sitting under the mango tree. And then, she said something that made me feel like I was holding my breath. She passed away a few months ago. The words hit harder than I expected. I didn't even know her. Not really. But the thought that she was gone left a strange ache in me. That night, I opened the diary again. Halfway through, I found a poem. I saw you at the market today. Your arms full of fruit. The sun painting your face gold. I wanted to say hello. But the words hid in my throat. Like birds afraid to fly. I remembered that day. I had no idea someone had been watching me so closely. The librarian noticed the diary in my hand the next afternoon. She frowned and asked where I'd found it. When I told her, she sighed and said, "Those were Anna's things. Her mother gave them to the school after she died. She asked us not to let anyone take the diary." I told her I didn't know. She looked at me for a long moment, then said, "If you read it, be careful. Some words aren't meant for everyone." But I couldn't stop. The more I read, the more I felt like she was still here, speaking to me through the ink. One poem read, "You walked past me today, and for a moment the world forgot how to breathe." I wanted to speak, but fear has a voice louder than love. I started carrying the diary everywhere. Reading it between classes, on the bus, even during lunch. It was like discovering a version of my life I hadn't known existed. One where someone was quietly loving me from a distance. I went to the mango tree Grace had mentioned. There was an old bench there, faded and chipped. In the wood were faint carvings, initials, dates. One of them matched a date in the diary. "The mango tree gave me shade today, and you passed by with a bag of books." The smell of rain was in the air, but the storm was only in my chest. I closed my eyes and tried to picture her sitting there, watching me pass by, writing those words. Grace told me Anna had been sick. Heart problems. In and out of hospital. She didn't want pity, she just wanted to live like everyone else. To finish school. To fall in love. Then I found a poem that hit me harder than the rest. It was cold today, and you lent me your red sweater. You didn't notice how my hands trembled, or how I wanted to keep it forever. I remembered, barely. After a football match, I'd given my sweater to a girl in the stands. I hadn't even looked at her face. I'd just gone back to the game. It made me realize something painful. The smallest, most forgettable things to me had been treasures to her. The last entry in the diary was short. "I wish I could tell you I'm leaving. I wish I could tell you why. But if I say it out loud, it will feel too real. And I'm not ready for goodbye." I closed the diary, my throat tight. Somehow, it felt like she was still writing to me. Even now. I couldn't shake the feeling that I owed Anna something, even though I'd never had a real conversation with her. I went back to Grace and asked her if she could tell me everything she remembered. She hesitated, but eventually she said, "Anna was gentle. She noticed things no one else noticed. She could spend 10 minutes just watching the way sunlight moved through leaves. She liked people, but from a distance. She never told me, but I could see it in her eyes whenever you walked past. She didn't have to say it. Her words made me feel both warm and guilty. The next day, I sat under the mango tree with the diary in my hands. I imagined her sitting there, scribbling in her neat handwriting. I imagined her glancing up from her page every time I walked by, wondering if I'd ever notice. Grace told me more about the hospital visits. About how Anna would disappear for weeks, then come back thinner, paler, but still smiling. She said Anna always brought books with her. And when she couldn't read, she wrote. I looked down at the pages in my hands and realized most of them were probably written from a hospital bed. One poem read, "From behind the shelf, I saw you reading. The world could have ended, and I'd still have stayed there, just to see your lips move as you read." I started seeing those library visits in my head, moments I thought were completely ordinary. Now I wondered, how many times had she been there, quietly watching me, and I never knew. Grace told me Anna's last days at school were quiet. She just faded from the routine. And then she was gone. No goodbye. No announcement. Just an empty bench and silence where she used to sit. That night I read the last few pages again. The entries got shorter. The handwriting shakier. But the words, they were still filled with longing. A week after finding the diary, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to know more about her. I asked Grace where Anna had lived. She gave me an address on the other side of town. I didn't tell anyone where I was going that Saturday. I just walked. The house was small, with faded blue walls and a wooden door. I knocked softly. A woman opened it. She looked tired, but her eyes were kind. "Are you Anna's mother?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "Yes, and you are?" "I'm Michael. I found something of hers in the school library." I showed her the diary. Her eyes softened as she looked at it. She didn't take it from me. Instead, she opened the door wider. "Come in." The inside of the house was warm and filled with the smell of tea. On a small table were picture frames, Anna at different ages, always with that same quiet expression. "She wrote about you," her mother said, sitting across from me. I felt my heart skip. "She told you?" She didn't say much. But when she did, her voice changed. She disappeared into another room and came back with a small wooden box. She placed it on the table between us. "These were hers too," she said. "Letters. None of them sent. All addressed to you." I opened the box slowly. The letters were folded neatly, each in an envelope with my name. I picked one and began to read. "I don't know why I write these. Maybe so I can imagine a world where I'm brave enough to talk to you. If I ever do. I hope I won't shake as much as I do when you're near." My throat tightened. I put the letter back carefully. There was also a small music box inside. Her mother handed it to me. She loved this. Said if she could, she'd give it to someone who made her happy. I turned the key and listened to the melody. Soft, simple, beautiful. When I left her house, I didn't go straight home. I walked to the mango tree, sat on the bench, and placed the music box on my lap. I opened the diary and began reading one of her poems out loud. The wind carried my voice, and for a moment, it felt like she was there, listening. The last few pages of the diary were still unread. I was afraid to reach the end. But on one of them, I noticed something odd. A line in the corner, written faintly, almost like she didn't want it to be seen. "If you ever find me here, go to the place where the river bends." That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The river bend. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't even know which river. But it felt like she had left it for me to find. And for the first time since I found the diary, I felt like her story wasn't over yet. That night I barely slept. The words in the corner of the page kept echoing in my head. "If you ever find me here, go to the place where the river bends." What river? The city had more than one. And why would she hide it like that? I got up twice in the night to check the diary again, as if the words might have changed. They hadn't. But I noticed something else, a faint smudge near the edge of the page. It looked like a fingerprint, smaller than mine. Hers maybe. It felt like she'd left a piece of herself for me to follow. The next morning, I found Grace before classes started. "Do you know anything about the river bend?" I asked. She looked at me strangely. "Why?" "It's written in Anna's diary. I think she wanted me to find it." Grace frowned, thinking. "There's a place outside town, near the old bridge. The river curves sharply there. Anna used to go there sometimes. Said it was her quiet place." My chest tightened. "Why there?" She never told me. Just said it made her feel less small. I knew I couldn't wait. After school I stuffed the diary into my bag along with the music box. It wasn't just curiosity anymore, it felt like a promise. If she'd gone to the trouble of leaving that note, it meant something. The walk to the edge of town felt longer than usual. Clouds were gathering overhead but I didn't care. I found it just before sunset, a quiet curve in the river, the water moving slowly, reflecting the pink and orange of the sky. A large tree leaned toward the water, its roots gripping the earth. Beneath it, the ground was worn smooth like someone had sat there often. I sat down. The air smelled of damp earth and something faintly sweet, like flowers far upstream. I pulled out the diary and flipped through it, hoping for another clue. And then I saw it, a dried flower taped to one page. Beneath it, "You'll know what to do when you hear it." I took out the music box and wound it. The melody floated into the air, delicate and slow. At first nothing happened. Then a faint rustling, like paper, caught my attention. Near the base of the tree, half buried in soil, was a small tin box. My hands trembled as I dug it out. The tin was old and rusted but still intact. Inside were folded papers, yellowed at the edges. The first was a poem. If you're reading this, it means I didn't get to say goodbye. But I wanted to leave you something that would outlast my voice. Beneath the poem was a small photograph of the river bend, the same spot where I now sat. There were other pages too. One was a sketch of the view from this spot. Another was a list of dates. At the bottom of the list, in shaky handwriting, "The day I almost told you." I checked the date. It was the same day I had played in a football match last year. The day I'd given her my sweater. I sat there for a long time, reading and rereading her words. The river kept moving, the sun kept setting, but it felt like time had stopped for me. Every line was heavy with the weight of what could have been. It wasn't just about the poems anymore. This was about seeing her life in pieces, and realizing I'd been in more of those pieces than I'd ever known. At the very bottom of the tin was a small folded square of paper. My name was written on the outside. Inside just one sentence, "There's more. But you have to follow the map." There was no map in the tin. I searched the tin again, then the ground around me. Nothing. It hit me, the diary. I'd never checked the inside of the back cover. I opened it there under the fading light, and saw it. A small hand-drawn map, so faint it was almost invisible, leading from the river bend deeper into the hills. I didn't know what was waiting there, but I knew I had to find out. I followed the faint pencil lines on the map, tracing them with my thumb until I could almost feel her hand there. From the river bend, the path climbed into the hills, narrow, hidden between elephant grass that brushed against my arms. The air was different out here. Damp. Alive. Dragonflies stitched invisible patterns in the air. Every few minutes I stopped, checking the map, chasing the little star she'd drawn. When I reached the ridge, the wind met me full in the face. The whole valley opened below, the river winding like a ribbon, the school's roof a red tongue in the distance. At the top, a flat rock waited. A star had been scratched into its surface, worn pale by rain and time. I ran my fingers over it. My chest loosened in a way I couldn't explain. "Anna," I said under my breath. The word was swallowed by the wind. Downhill, 3 dots were drawn like a constellation. I followed them to a wooden footbridge that sagged over a fast, narrow stream. The boards groaned under my weight. An old man mending a fishing line looked up and said, "Careful. 3rd plank's a liar." Then, as if it was the most ordinary thing in the world, he added, "You come late like the other girl." My pulse jumped. "What girl?" "The quiet one," he said. "Sat by the reeds. Didn't fish. Just listened. Sometimes wound a little music box. Played a sad tune." He pointed beyond the bridge. "Up the red slope. There's a rock shaped like a sleeping cow. She left a mark there." The soil stained my shoes the color of rust. I found the rock easily. On its side, another scratched star. I ran my hand along the base and my knuckles caught metal. A small tin. Inside, brittle jasmine petals and a poem. "Storm day. You were a red mark on the field, and the sky had too much to say. I thought the rain would swallow my words, so I hid them here, where thunder can't find them." Beneath the poem, a tiny photograph. The football field blurred with rain. Me mid-run in my red sweater. She'd been there. She'd saved this. At the bottom of the tin, a brass key tied with a note. "Home." The library was almost empty when I arrived. The librarian's eyes narrowed when she saw the diary under my arm. "Michael." "I'm not taking it," I said. "I think this key opens something here." She hesitated, then led me to an old cabinet. The lock swallowed the key like it had been waiting. Inside, papers, old logs, and a red-spine notebook. Not a diary but an album. ticket stubs, quotes, sketches of people reading. And taped in the middle, a program from the school play I'd skipped for football. My name circled. Narrator. She kept the version of me that never happened. On the map, the next mark was a cross. I knew the place before I got there, the old chapel ruins, jacaranda blossoms scattering on cracked stone. In a beam's shadow, I found another tin wrapped in plastic. Inside, a dried blossom and a poem. If I could have heard you as the narrator, maybe I'd have learned the shape of your silences. But I heard enough. Your laugh after school. Your breath at the window in the rain. The way you said, okay, when the world wasn't. Her words clung to me all the way home. That night, laying out the tins, letters, and poems across my floor, I noticed something strange. The diary's spine had a hidden pocket. Inside was a tracing paper map, redrawn with tiny notes. Market, Ask Amina, Old Studio Bell. And in the corner, if it's time. I found Amina at the market, her stall a neat row of mangoes and paper-wrapped sweets. When I asked about Anna, she smiled sadly. The girl who bought one mango and asked for the smallest because big sweetness made her dizzy. Amina handed me a small plastic case. She told me a boy might come. A boy who doesn't know he's a story. Inside was a memory card and a folded paper with an address. Photo studio behind the printing shop. That evening, Grace and I sat on her veranda with an old phone. I slid the card in. Her voice filled the space between us. Okay, practice. If I ever talk to you, what would I say? I'd say I'm not a ghost. I just live in quiet places. And I see more there. Another clip. If I don't get to finish the map, the bell will explain. Her voice rearranged the world around me. I didn't want to breathe too loudly, afraid I'd lose it. At dawn, Grace and I climbed the bell tower. The wood smelled of dust and old ropes. On a beam in her small handwriting, look down when the world is loud. Under the floorboards, another tin. Inside, a map of the library with a circle around the back room and a tiny sketch of a key. In the corner, if you've made it here, you're brave enough for what's next. The bell hummed as we climbed down, the sound following me like a thread pulling toward the library. The library smelled different that morning. Not the dry paper comfort I'd grown used to, but something sharper like wood newly opened. I slipped in before the noise of the school began, holding the tin and the map from the bell tower. The back room was small, more storage than sanctuary. Boxes stacked high. Old chairs leaning against one another. In the far corner, a filing cabinet older than me. I knelt, running my hand along its drawers until I found the smallest one. A sketch of a key had been right. The lock was simple. The key from the first tin slid in easily. Inside, a velvet pouch, faded blue. My fingers shook as I opened it. A locket. Round, with a pressed daisy under glass. I clicked it open. A photo of her on one side, smiling faintly, head tilted toward the light. On the other, a scrap of paper. Red sweater day. I thought my heart would break from the sound of your laugh. I held it for a long time, feeling the weight of it in my palm like it might tip the world. The librarian appeared at the doorway. I think, she said softly, you found enough to know she loved you. But I didn't want to stop knowing. The photo studio was tucked behind the printing shop, just as the note had said. The bell over the door gave a tired chime when I pushed it open. An old man looked up from a counter. You're Michael, he said without asking. I nodded. She came here twice. Always with the same request, print the photo of him running. The one in the rain. He handed me a small envelope. Inside was that same photograph from the tin but clearer, warmer. On the back, in her handwriting, you were the color in the storm. Leaving the studio, the air felt heavier. Grace met me by the bridge. You look like you've been somewhere you shouldn't have. I told her about the locket, the photo. She listened without interrupting, then said, you realize she made this trail for you. Not for anyone else. For you to see yourself the way she saw you. We walked in silence until the sound of the river grew louder. The bend was different now. The water was higher, the current faster. I saw the old fisherman again. He waved lazily. Back again. That girl, she used to leave things under that big stone. I waded in, the water biting cold around my calves. Under the stone was another tin, this one heavier. Inside, a cassette tape and a note. If you play this, listen all the way. That night, Grace's cousin lent us a cassette player. We sat cross-legged on my bedroom floor as the tape clicked into place. Her voice was softer here. If you found this, it means you kept going. I don't know what you're like now. Maybe different. Maybe the same. But I hope you've learned, not all love is loud. Some of it is quiet, waiting, watching, and still it's love. There was a pause, the faint sound of her breathing. Then, I'm not afraid of leaving anymore. I just don't want to be forgotten. The tape clicked off, leaving the room full of the kind of silence that feels alive. I looked at the spread on my bed: tins, letters, photos, maps. Pieces of a girl I'd never truly met but somehow carried like I had. The next morning I found myself at the mango tree again. I wound the music box until the notes hung in the air, bright against the hum of the day. For a moment, I imagined her walking toward me from across the field, her eyes catching mine for the first time. And for the first time since I'd opened that diary, I felt almost ready for whatever the last mark on her map would reveal. The last mark on Anna's map was so faint, I almost missed it. Down in the bottom corner, under a smudge of pencil, a small circle sat alone. Beside it, in the lightest handwriting I'd seen in the whole diary, just 5 words: "The hill that hums." I traced the letters with my thumb, wondering if she'd meant it to be a mystery, or if she'd thought I'd never find it. Grace hadn't heard of it. Neither had the librarian. It was the old fisherman by the river who leaned back on his stool, eyes squinting against the sun, and said, "Could be the one past Nakawuka. Wind slips through the rocks up there, makes a sound. Some say it's singing." It was almost an hour away on foot. I decided to go that Saturday, just me, the map, and the music box in my bag. The road out of town felt longer than usual. Dust clung to my shoes, and the air smelled faintly of smoke from cooking fires. Beyond the last cluster of houses, the path thinned into dirt, winding between fields of tall grass that swayed and hissed in the wind. It was quiet enough to hear my own footsteps. Halfway there, I caught myself imagining her on this same walk, maybe holding her sweater close, her notebook tucked under her arm, pausing now and then to look back like someone might call her name. The hill rose suddenly from the land, its slope cutting against the horizon. The closer I got, the more the air changed, cooler, sharper. Then I heard it. A sound that wasn't the wind and yet was. Low, steady, somewhere between a hum and a sigh. It wrapped around the rocks and slipped into the hollow spaces like it had been here forever. I started climbing. The ground was uneven, scattered with stones that shifted under my weight. Halfway up, a darker patch caught my eye, a shallow pocket in the rock. I knelt. Inside was a tin, its metal flaking with rust. It was harder to open than the others. The lid scraped as it gave way, and inside was something soft. A folded piece of red cloth. My breath caught. Her sweater. I pulled it out slowly, the fibers catching against my fingers. It smelled faintly of dust and something I couldn't name, but in that moment it didn't matter, because it was hers. Beneath it was a note, the paper folded neatly in half. "You said it without knowing. That I looked warm. I kept that longer than you think." I sat there for a long time, sweater in my lap, listening to the hum of the hill. I don't know if it was the wind or my own chest, but it felt like the hill was keeping a secret for her. When I finally made my way back down, Grace was waiting at the base. She didn't ask what I'd found. She just fell into step beside me, the sound of our shoes on the road replacing any words we might have said. That night, I laid everything out on my bedroom floor: the tins, the letters, the photos, the music box, the locket, and now the sweater. It looked like a life in pieces. But somehow there was still space for one last piece I hadn't found yet. I went back to the diary. Near the front, on a page where her handwriting was neat and strong, I noticed a small, faint drawing in the margin. An archway, almost like the entrance to a tunnel, with a single star drawn above it. Beneath it, in letters so faint I had to tilt the page toward the light: "Where the star meets the stone." I stared at the words, "Where the star meets the stone." It wasn't on the map. It wasn't in the letters. It felt different. Like it was a clue for something she wasn't sure she wanted to write plainly. I showed Grace the drawing the next day under the mango tree. She frowned, tapping the page with her finger. "There's an old rock formation past the hills. People call it the Star Arch. At night, if you stand inside, the stars line up through the gap." She paused. "It's far. And dangerous at night." But the idea of standing where she might have stood, seeing what she saw, was enough to push the warning to the back of my mind. The path to Star Arch was nothing like the road to the humming hill. This one wound through a narrow valley, the grass taller, the ground softer underfoot. The late afternoon light bled gold through the trees, catching dust motes that drifted like tiny planets. I carried the music box in my bag again. I'd started to think of it as something that belonged wherever her words went. The arch appeared slowly, like it was rising from the earth itself. 2 great stones leaning toward each other, touching at the top to frame a narrow slice of sky. I stepped inside. The air shifted, cooler, stiller, like a held breath. Above, the slice of sky was deepening into night. I waited. And then it happened. A single star, brighter than the others, slid into view between the stones, sitting perfectly in the narrow frame above my head. That's when I saw it, carved faintly into the inner face of the stone, low enough that I had to kneel. Her initials. And mine. I ran my fingers over the carving. It wasn't deep, but it was deliberate. Beside the letters was a small heart, almost hidden in the stone's natural lines. The thought of her kneeling here, carving this in silence, made my chest tighten in a way I couldn't name. I sat back and pulled out the music box. The melody spilled into the stillness, curling around the stone like it belonged here. When I returned home, I didn't add the carving to my collection. It wasn't something to be moved or held, it was something to be visited. Like a place you go when you want to remember without speaking. I thought I was done. I thought the diary had given me everything it could. But the truth is I kept finding myself reading it again. Not for clues this time, but because it felt like being with her. Weeks passed. The tin stayed in my room. The sweater stayed folded on my shelf. But the empty space in my chest, the one I'd thought would fade, didn't. Grace noticed. One afternoon she said, "You've been carrying her story. But maybe you should let her carry yours too." Her words stayed with me. I opened the diary to the last blank page. For the first time I didn't just read. I wrote. I told her about the humming hill, about the star arch, about how her words had followed me into dreams and silences. I told her how I wished I'd looked up sooner. When I was done, I closed the diary and set it on my desk. The next morning it was gone. I searched everywhere, the desk, my bag, the floor. Nothing. I asked Grace, the librarian, even my mother. Nobody had seen it. That night I dreamed of the mango tree. The bench was empty except for the diary sitting open. On its pages were new words, not mine, not hers, but something in between. There's one place left. When I woke, I knew this wasn't over. The diary wasn't lost. It was waiting. And somewhere in the quiet spaces between stone and sky, between water and wind, Anna was still leading me.